My mother-in-law didn't realize I was paying for everything for my in-laws. After 15 years, when I returned from a trip, she changed the house keys and told me not to come back. I moved to a new apartment and stopped paying anything. She panicked and called me. What happened next? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. It was 11:51 at night when the Uber pulled away, leaving me standing in the humid darkness of the driveway. I was exhausted, carrying the weight of a 10-hour flight and a carry-on bag. I walked up to the massive oak double doors, the ones I had paid $20,000 to restore last year, and punched my code into the smart lock. Nothing happened. The keypad flashed red. Access denied. I frowned and typed it again, slower this time. User Jennifer deleted. That was when I looked down. Lined up along the edge of the porch, illuminated by the motion sensor floodlight, were 6 black trash bags. They were stuffed so full the plastic was stretching white at the seams, and taped to the door at eye level was a piece of lined notebook paper. It was Elizabeth's handwriting, jagged and sharp. It read, "We need the space for productive family members. Go back to your parents." I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the door or wail into the night air. I stood there for exactly 10 seconds, analyzing the structural integrity of my life as if it were a server crash. Stepping over to the first bag, I ripped it open. Inside, my clothes were tangled together with my daughter's stuffed animals and my expensive architectural reference books, all thrown in carelessly like garbage. But something was missing. My workstation, my servers, the tools of my trade that actually paid for the roof over their heads. I turned my gaze toward the detached garage about 50 yards away. The side door was slightly ajar. The gravel crunched loudly under my heels as I crossed the yard. Inside, in the dusty gloom, they had dumped my entire existence. My 3-monitor setup was precarious on top of a stack of old tires. My server tower, which contained terabytes of client data, was sitting on the oil-stained concrete. Taped to the monitor was another note, this one in my sister-in-law Jessica's bubbly, childish script, $200 a month. Pay or we trash it. Venmo details below. I stared at it. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. It started at the base of my spine and moved up, freezing my chest, my throat, and finally my mind. There was no heat in this anger. It was absolute zero. Panic is a design flaw, and I had trained it out of my system years ago. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a data breach, and I knew exactly how to patch it. I gathered my server and the monitors, carrying them 2 at a time to the trunk of the rental car I had ordered while walking back down the driveway. I loaded everything with the precision of a crime scene cleaner. My daughter Ashley was already safe at my parents' house for the weekend, thank God. She didn't have to see this. Once inside the driver's seat, I locked the doors. I didn't start the engine yet. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a notification from our joint American Express account. Transaction approved. The Prime Cut Steakhouse. $840. I looked at the time. It was midnight. They were celebrating. They had kicked me out, thrown my life into trash bags, and now they were toasting their victory with steaks and vintage wine, paid for by the woman they just evicted. My pulse remained steady. Hysteria is inefficient. For 15 years, I had treated them like family. They had treated me like a resource, and resources can be cut off. I opened my banking app. The blue light of the screen illuminated the dark car interior. I navigated to the credit card section. Report lost or stolen. Confirm. Next, I went to the joint checking account, the one Michael used for his venture capital image. Transfer funds. I moved every single cent of my earnings into my private business savings account. Freeze account. Confirm. I watched the loading circle spin for a moment, and then a green check mark appeared. Done. I put the phone down and finally started the car. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't look at the house. I didn't look at the trash bags on the porch. Inside, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they forgot one crucial detail. You don't evict the landlord and expect the lights to stay on. I checked us into a suite at the Marriott downtown. My daughter Ashley fell asleep almost immediately, curled up on the crisp white duvet, still wearing her jeans. She was 13, old enough to know something was wrong, but young enough to trust that I would fix it. I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, my laptop open on the glass desk. I wasn't looking for a divorce lawyer yet. I was looking at the spreadsheet I had hidden in a password-protected folder named Recipes. To my mother-in-law, Elizabeth, and my sister-in-law, Jessica, I was just Jennifer, the woman who spent all day playing on the computer in the attic. They thought I was a low-level freelancer scraping by. Lucky to have married Michael, the brilliant venture capitalist. That was the lie we told to protect Michael's fragile ego. The truth was in the spreadsheet staring back at me. Michael hadn't closed a deal in 4 years. He hadn't held a steady job in 3. His investment firm was a website I built for him and a terrifying amount of debt he tried to hide. I was a senior digital architect for a global infrastructure firm. I didn't just play on the computer. I designed the virtual backbones for Fortune 500 companies. My base salary was $320,000 a year, not including bonuses. For 15 years, I had been the invisible backbone of this family too. My eyes tracked down the columns. The historic estate renovation, $150,000, paid from my bonus. Ashley's private school tuition, $35,000 a year, auto-drafted from my account. Jessica's influencer launch parties that never launched anything but a hangover. My credit card covered every bottle of champagne. People always ask, why did you stay? Why did you let them treat you like a burden when you were the provider? It is a phenomenon sociologists call invisible labor, but in relationships, it feels more like a slow erasure. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, methodical conditioning. In the beginning, I paid the bills because I loved Michael, and he was in between wins. I wanted to be the supportive wife. Then, the gratitude stopped. My contribution stopped being a gift and started being an expectation. Eventually, the narrative shifted entirely. Because I worked remotely and handled the domestic chaos, they stopped seeing the architect and only saw the housewife. Michael started believing his own con. He convinced himself and his mother that the money appeared because of his crypto genius or his pending deals, and that I was just the drag on his resources. I had subsidized their delusion for so long that they actually believed I was the parasite. I closed the laptop. The reflection in the dark screen wasn't a victim. It was a woman who had finally stopped signing the checks. They thought they had evicted a leech. They had no idea they had just severed their own life support system. And unlike a power company, I wasn't going to send a disconnect notice. I had already pulled the plug. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly over the city skyline. But on my phone, a completely different reality was being constructed. I sat in the hotel restaurant, sipping black coffee, and watched the notifications roll in. I didn't feel hurt. I felt like a scientist observing a failed experiment. The first notification came from TikTok. My sister-in-law Jessica had posted a new video. The caption read, "Finally clearing out the negative energy to make room for my baby angel. Hashtag family first. Hashtag no more leeches." I clicked play. The video started with a shot of Jessica standing in the doorway of my home office. The attic space I had soundproofed and wired with business-grade fiber optics at my own expense. "So guys," she chirped, holding a can of pink paint, "we are finally reclaiming this room. It was being used as let's just say a storage unit for someone who didn't contribute." The camera panned to the corner. My remaining architectural blueprints, the ones for the downtown library project I was leading, were being crumpled up and shoved into a garbage bag by my mother-in-law, Elizabeth. Out with the toxic, in with the love, Jessica squealed. I watched the video 3 times, not out of pain, but out of fascination. The audacity was almost impressive. They weren't just kicking me out, they were rewriting history in real time. They genuinely believed that by painting over my office, they could paint over the fact that I paid for the walls. 10 minutes later, a text message arrived from Elizabeth. Since you decided to run away to your parents' house instead of facing your responsibilities, send me the login for the utility account immediately. The internet is lagging, and Michael has important VC calls this afternoon. Don't be petty. I almost laughed out loud. Michael's important calls. Michael hadn't had an important call since 2021. His calls were online poker tournaments and fantasy football drafts. But Elizabeth needed to believe the lie, so she protected it fiercely. She was demanding the password to the internet I paid for, so her son could pretend to work in the house I funded while they evicted me. Then came the voicemail from Michael. I held the phone to my ear, listening to his voice smooth, confident, and completely delusional. Jen, look, Mom is really upset. You caused a huge scene last night leaving like that. It was embarrassing. But we talked, and we're willing to be reasonable. If you come back today and apologize to Mom and Jessica, we can discuss letting you sleep in the guest room for a few weeks. Just until you find a job or get back on your feet. We aren't monsters, call me. I lowered the phone. They truly thought they held all the cards. They thought I was destitute, terrified, and homeless. They were offering me the guest room in my own house as an act of charity, conditional on my submission. They thought they were negotiating. They didn't realize they were talking to the executioner. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't call Michael back. I didn't comment on the TikTok. I finished my coffee, wiped my mouth with the linen napkin, and opened my laptop. It was time to stop observing and start deleting. I spent the next 4 hours turning that hotel suite into a war room. I didn't pace the floor, and I didn't call my mother to cry. I sat at the glass desk, my posture perfect, treating the end of my marriage exactly like I treated a failing corporate infrastructure project. Identify the liabilities, isolate the assets, and terminate the connection. First, I hired the team. I found a forensic accountant named Robert who specialized in hidden marital assets and a divorce attorney whose reviews described her as terrifying. I paid their retainers upfront using the funds I had secured the night before. I gave them a simple instruction. Go scorched earth. Find every dollar he hid. But legal proceedings take time, and I wasn't in the mood to wait for a court date. I wanted immediate, tangible results. I wanted to see the structure crumble. I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir from the minibar and opened a new browser window. This wasn't revenge. It was administrative maintenance. I started with Michael's pride and joy, the Range Rover. He drove it like he owned it, parking it valet at the club to show off to his non-existent investors. But he didn't own it. The lease was in my name because his credit score was in the double digits. I logged into the leasing portal. Request voluntary repossession. Location for pickup, 123 Highland Estate Drive. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. I smiled, imagining the tow truck pulling up just as he was getting ready for his fake workday. Next was the lifeline. My sister-in-law Jessica didn't have a job. She had an audience. Her entire self-worth was funneled through a data plan that cost me $300 a month. I logged into the carrier account. I saw the data usage spikes: TikTok, Instagram, live streaming the painting of my office. Select line. Jessica. Action: suspend service. Reason: device theft. Technically, she hadn't stolen the phone, but she had stolen 15 years of my patience, so we called it even. Then I went for Elizabeth's throat, or rather, her social standing. The country club membership was the only reason she still had friends. It was entirely in my name. Membership status, cancel immediately. Reason, non-payment. I didn't just cancel it. I flagged the card on file as invalid, so the automatic renewal would bounce publicly at the front desk the next time she tried to order a gin and tonic. Finally, the kill switch. I navigated to the utility company's dashboard. The electric bill was substantial for a drafty historic estate, averaging $600 a month. It was entirely in my name. Service request, stop service. Effective date, today. I clicked submit. The screen flashed green. Request processed. I took a sip of wine. I closed my eyes and visualized the invisible signals traveling through the fiber optic cables I had installed. In a few hours, the lights would flicker. The internet would die. The screens would go black. The house would plunge into a darkness that matched their bank accounts. I didn't throw a vase against the wall. I didn't slash tires. I simply stopped paying the subscription fee for a life that no longer served me. My forensic accountant, Robert, called me at 4 in the afternoon. His voice was different this time. Earlier, he had sounded professional, like a man looking for hidden receipts. Now, he sounded grave, like a man looking at a felony. "Jennifer," he said, skipping the pleasantries, "I need you to look at the document I just emailed you. Page 4. I opened the PDF on my laptop. It was a loan document from a private lender, a second mortgage on the historic estate. I didn't authorize this. I said, my eyes scanning the numbers. The house is in Elizabeth's name. I just pay the primary mortgage. Keep reading, Robert said. Look at the cosigner. I scrolled down. There, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. It was a decent forgery, but the loop on the J was too wide. And right next to it was a copy of my last 3 tax returns documents I kept in a locked safe in my office. He used your credit rating and your income to secure a $300,000 loan against his mother's house, Robert explained. But here is the kicker. Look at the disbursement account. The funds hadn't gone to house repairs. They had gone to an offshore sports betting site and a crypto wallet that was currently worth less than $5. This is fraud, I stated flatly. Identity theft. Bank fraud. It gets worse, Robert interrupted. I cross-referenced this with the family loans Michael mentioned in his emails. I found a withdrawal from Elizabeth's teacher retirement fund. $50,000. Taken out 6 months ago. I frowned. Elizabeth is stingy. She would never give him that kind of money unless she thought it was a guaranteed investment. She didn't give it to him, Robert said, his voice dropping an octave. I found an email chain. Michael told his mother that you were in legal trouble. He told her you needed $50,000 to settle a lawsuit or you'd go to jail, and that you had a massive inheritance coming from a distant aunt that would pay her back double. I sat back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs. The pieces finally snapped into place. The resentment, the parasite comments, the entitlement. Michael hadn't just been a leech, he had been a conductor. He had played a symphony of lies. He told me his mother was demanding and needy, so I would pay the bills to keep the peace. He told his mother I was a secret, reckless spender waiting on an inheritance so she would loan him money to save me. He had stolen from his mother and blamed it on his wife. He had stolen from his wife to fund the lifestyle that kept his mother quiet. He had defrauded the 2 women who loved him, pitting us against each other to hide the fact that he was the only villain in the room. Jennifer, Robert asked, what do you want to do? This isn't civil court anymore. This is prison time. I looked at the forged signature on the screen. I thought about the trash bags on the porch. I thought about Elizabeth calling me a parasite while her son drained her life savings in my name. Print it all, I said. Print every single page. I'm going to pay them a visit. I hung up. I wasn't just the architect of my own life anymore. I was holding the blueprints to their destruction. The house was a black void against the night sky. I had instructed the utility company to execute the shutoff at 5 p.m., and they were punctual. I parked my rental car at the bottom of the driveway, leaving the headlights on to cut a beam through the darkness. I wasn't hiding anymore. I walked through the unlocked front door, the smart locks were dead without power, and followed the flicker of candlelight to the kitchen. They were all there. Elizabeth, Jessica, and Michael, huddled around the marble island I had paid for, surrounded by expensive emergency candles. When I walked in, the atmosphere shifted from panic to pure, concentrated venom. "You!" Elizabeth shrieked, her voice cracking. "You ungrateful, spiteful little leech. How dare you cut the power? Michael has been on the phone for hours trying to fix your mess." Michael stepped forward, trying to loom over me in the dim light. He looked exhausted, his shirt unbuttoned, sweating in the humidity of a house with no AC. "You've made your point, Jen. Turning off the lights? Canceling the cards? It's childish. Turn it back on, apologize to my mother, and maybe we won't sue you for abandonment." I didn't answer him. I walked past him to the pantry where my backup server drives were stored. I grabbed the hard case. "Put that down!" Jessica yelled. "That belongs to the house." I turned to face them. I placed the case on the counter with a heavy thud. "You keep using that word," I said, my voice calm, echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "Parasite. You called me that in your note. You called me that in your text messages. Because that's what you are," Elizabeth spat. "Living here rent-free, dragging my son down while he tries to build an empire." I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and cold. "It is fascinating," I said, looking at Elizabeth. "Psychologists call it projection. You accuse me of the very thing you are because deep down, you know the truth. A parasite feeds on a host. A parasite takes nutrients and gives nothing back. A host sustains the life of the organism." I pointed to the Sub-Zero refrigerator. "I bought that, $11,000. I pointed to the ceiling. "I paid for the roof replacement last year, $24,000. I pointed to the car keys on the counter. "I paid the lease every single month." I looked Michael dead in the eyes. "I am the host. You are the infection. And tonight, I am curing myself." Michael lunged forward. "Shut up! She's lying, Mom! She's hysterical!" Am I? I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of papers Robert had printed. I slammed them onto the marble island next to the candles. "Elizabeth, you asked where your $50,000 went? The money you loaned Michael to keep me out of jail?" Elizabeth froze. Her eyes darted from me to Michael. Michael's face went pale in the candlelight. "He didn't give it to me," I said, sliding the bank transfer record toward her. "He sent it to a betting site in Antigua. And when that wasn't enough, he forged your signature to take out a second mortgage on this house. You aren't just sitting in the dark, Elizabeth. You are sitting in a foreclosed home." The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. Elizabeth picked up the paper. Her hands were trembling so hard the candle flame flickered wildly. She looked at the numbers. She looked at the forged signature. Then she looked at her son. "Michael?" she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. "Mom, I can explain," Michael stammered, backing away. "It was an investment. I was going to double it." "You stole from me?" Elizabeth's voice rose to a scream. "You stole my retirement? You stole my house?" She lunged at him, clawing at his chest. Jessica started screaming. The alliance of the parasites had shattered the moment the food source was revealed. I picked up my server drives. I didn't stay to watch the implosion. I didn't need to. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them screaming in the dark, illuminated only by the dying light of their own candles. It has been 6 months since I walked out of that dark kitchen. Today, the morning sun is streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment. It is a modern, open-concept space downtown. No crumbling historic walls, no drafty hallways, and no hidden debts. My daughter, Ashley, is in her room, actually laughing on a video call with her friends, unburdened by the tension that used to suffocate our home. I sat down at my desk with my morning coffee and opened the local real estate listings. There it was, 123 Highland Estate Drive, bank owned, foreclosure auction pending. The family legacy Elizabeth fought so hard to protect is now just an asset on a bank's balance sheet. As for the family itself, the dissolution was absolute. When the forensic audit proved Michael had stolen his mother's retirement funds, Elizabeth didn't just evict him. She turned state's witness. Michael is currently out on bail, living in a motel, awaiting trial for 3 counts of wire fraud and identity theft. Elizabeth is in a small 1-bedroom rental, relying on Social Security. I closed the browser tab. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt the quiet satisfaction of a balanced equation. I opened my spreadsheet one last time, the one hidden in the recipes folder. I scrolled to the column marked Family Support. For 15 years, that column had been a bleeding wound of thousands of dollars a month. Mortgages, cars, tuition, club fees, egos. Today, the cell read 0. I highlighted the entire file. Right-click, delete. I learned a lesson that cost me $500,000, but it was worth every cent to finally understand it. You cannot buy respect. The moment you have to pay to be tolerated, you are not a family member. You are a customer, and the service was terrible. I closed my laptop. The silence in the apartment wasn't heavy. It was expensive, it was peaceful, and best of all, it was entirely mine. If you have ever felt like the invisible backbone of your family, share this story. You are not a bank, and you are not a doormat. You are the architect of your own life.